The rain in Lagos does not fall, it punishes. Kofi sat on the cold concrete of the bus stop, clutching a plastic bag containing his termination letter and a bottle of painkillers. His side throbbed, a sharp, stinging reminder of the surgery that had taken place only 3 weeks ago. Through the blur of the downpour, a sleek, black Maybach pulled up to the curb. The tinted window rolled down just an inch. Kofi looked up, hoping for a hand of mercy, but he saw only the cold, piercing eyes of Chief Marcus Thorne, the man who was currently breathing because Kofi's kidney was now filtering his blood. Chief Marcus didn't offer a ride. He didn't offer a thank you. He simply flicked a cigarette butt into the puddle, splashing Kofi's worn shoes, and drove off into the gray mist. This is Elmerem Stories, where stories don't just inspire, they transform how you see life. We're on a journey to 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. If these stories touch your heart, join the family, hit subscribe, and let's rise together. The roots of this betrayal stretched back 3 years earlier into the gleaming, glass-walled corridors of Thorne Industries, a place where dreams were either manufactured with ruthless efficiency or crushed beneath the weight of a $1 billion real estate empire. Kofi was the invisible man. He was a junior logistics clerk, a man whose presence was felt only when a file was missing or a delivery was late. He was a widower, a man of quiet dignity who lived in a cramped one-room apartment in the heart of Mushin. Every kobo Kofi earned was budgeted with the precision of a jeweler. He skipped meals so he could pay the tuition for his younger sister, Efwa, who was studying medicine in Ghana. To Kofi, Efwa was the light of his world. She was the legacy of their late parents, and he was the bridge carrying her to greatness. At Thorne Industries, Chief Marcus Thorne was seen as a god. He was a man who measured success by the number of zeros in his bank account and the number of people he could intimidate in a single afternoon. To Marcus, employees were not human beings. They were assets or liabilities. One Tuesday afternoon, the god of Thorne Industries fell. During a heated board meeting, Marcus clutched his side, his face turning a sickly shade of gray before he collapsed onto the mahogany table. The diagnosis was swift and devastating. Total renal failure. Both kidneys had shut down. The invincible chief was now a prisoner to a dialysis machine. The news sent shockwaves through the elite circles of Lagos. The friends who had shared Marcus's vintage cognac and toasted to his health suddenly became very busy. When asked to be tested for a match, they all suddenly discovered they had high blood pressure or family histories that prevented them from helping. Kofi watched all of this from the service hallway. He saw Marcus's teenage daughter, Maya, sitting on a hospital floor, her designer dress crumpled as she wept for her father. She looked just like Efwa did the day their late mother died. Kofi didn't have a mansion, he didn't have a fleet of cars, but he had 2 healthy kidneys and a heart that couldn't stand the sight of a child losing a parent. "I am O negative," Kofi whispered to the head nurse one evening after his shift. "I want to be tested. If I am a match, I will give him mine." The nurse looked at his worn-out shoes and his tired eyes. "You know there is no payment for this, right? It must be a voluntary gift." Kofi nodded. "I am not selling a part of myself. I am giving a father back to his daughter." The test came back a perfect match. The nobody from Mushin was the only person on Earth who could save the King of Victoria Island. The surgery took place in a private wing, hidden from the press. Kofi lay in a crowded ward after the procedure, the pain of the incision gnawing at his side. He didn't mind. He felt a sense of divine purpose. But while Kofi was dreaming of a better future, Marcus Thorne was waking up in a VIP suite, breathing through Kofi's sacrifice and already planning how to erase the evidence of his own vulnerability. While Kofi was at home in his humid room in Mushin, struggling to stand up without tearing his stitches, the atmosphere inside the penthouse of Thorne Industries was one of clinical coldness. Chief Marcus Thorne sat behind his desk, his skin glowing with a newfound vitality. The transplant had been a miracle. He felt younger, sharper, and more powerful than ever. But every time he caught a glimpse of his reflection or felt the slight tug of the scar on his abdomen, he didn't feel gratitude, he felt shame. To Marcus, being saved by a nobody like Kofi was a stain on his reputation. In his mind, he was a predator, a self-made titan who owed no one to anyone. The fact that a junior logistics clerk's organ was currently keeping him alive was an ego-bruising secret he couldn't live with. He summoned his fixer, a sharp-featured man named Barrister Jude, into the office. "Is the clerk still on the payroll?" Marcus asked, his voice devoid of any warmth. "Yes, Chief," Jude replied, checking his tablet. "The HR department is expecting him back next week." Marcus stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Lagos Lagoon. "I want him gone, today. Drafted termination letter." Jude hesitated, a rare moment of conscience flickering across his face. "But, Chief, the man literally gave you a part of his body. If the press finds out we fired him while he's still recovering from the surgery he did for you, the public relations fallout will be catastrophic." "The press won't find out because you will handle it," Marcus snapped, turning around. "Every time I see that man in the hallway, I see a creditor. I see a man who thinks he owns a piece of me. I don't want a hero in my logistics department. I want a ghost. Fire him for prolonged absence or decreased productivity. I don't care about the excuse. Just make sure he never walks through these doors again." Marcus Thorne lived in a world where everything had a price tag, but he refused to pay the debt of honor. He believed that by removing the man, he could remove the obligation. Meanwhile, Marcus was preparing for the biggest deal of his life, the new Lagos City project. This was a multi-billion naira contract funded by an international conglomerate known as the Golden Hand. The conglomerate was famous for its ethics-first policy. They didn't just invest in buildings, they invested in people. They had sent an anonymous representative to Nigeria to live among the people and observe Marcus's character from the shadows. Marcus thought he was being watched for his business acumen. He had no idea that the nobody he was about to throw into the gutter was the very person the world was watching to see how he would be treated. While Marcus spent millions on a gala to showcase his vision, Kofi was sitting in the dark, counting his last few painkillers, wondering why his company email had been deactivated. The king was preparing for a feast, while the man who gave him his life was preparing for a funeral. The storm outside Kofi's small room in Mushin was nothing compared to the storm brewing in his chest. When the letter arrived, delivered not by a friend or a colleague, but by a cold-eyed courier, Kofi's hands shook so violently the paper rattled like dry leaves. Terminated due to prolonged medical absence and decreased physical productivity. The words were a physical blow to his stomach. He hadn't even been back for a week. He was still wearing the surgical binder that kept his insides together. He tried to call the office, but his number had been blocked. He tried to reach out to the HR manager he had known for years, but the man's only response was a text. "Orders from the top, Kofi. Don't come to the building. Security has your photo." Within 2 weeks, the slow-motion collapse of Kofi's life accelerated. Without a salary, he couldn't pay the mounting medical bills for his post-operative care. Then came the landlord. "I heard you lost your job, Kofi," the landlord said, standing in the doorway with his arms folded. "This is a business, not a charity. If the rent isn't here by Friday, your things will be on the street." Kofi reached out to his sister, Efua, in Ghana. He didn't tell her he had lost his job. He didn't tell her he had given away a kidney. He only told her, "Study hard, little sister. The money might be a bit late this month, but don't worry. Big Brother has everything under control." He hung up the phone and wept until his surgical wound throbbed with a dull, sickening heat. By the end of the month, Kofi was homeless. He found refuge in the basement of a small community church, sleeping on a thin mat near the choir robes. Every morning, he would wake up, wash his face with cold water, and go out to look for work. But who would hire a man who walked with a limp and couldn't lift anything heavier than a bag of oranges? One afternoon, Barrister Jude, Marcus's enforcer, tracked him down. He found Kofi sitting on a bench outside a public clinic. Jude didn't come with an apology. He came with a briefcase.
Chief Marcus is a generous man, Jude said, sliding a document across the bench. He wants to offer you a one-time severance of 500,000 naira. But there's a condition. You sign this non-disclosure agreement. You never tell a soul about the surgery. You never mention the name Thorn Industries again. If you break this, we will sue you for everything you don't have. Kofi looked at the money. It was enough to pay his rent, buy his medicine, and send Afua her tuition. But then he looked at the paper. It was a contract to sell his truth. It was a command to pretend that his sacrifice never happened. Tell the chief, Kofi said, his voice raspy but firm, that he can keep his money. I didn't give him my kidney for a price, and I won't sell my voice for one either. If he wants to live in fear of the man who saved him, that is his prison, not mine. Jude sneered, tucking the paper back into his bag. You're a fool, Kofi. By next week, you'll be begging for this paper. As Jude's luxury car sped away, splashing mud onto Kofi's only clean shirt, a woman from the church mission watched from the shadows. She was the mother of the anonymous representative from the Golden Hand. She saw the limp, she saw the mud, and she saw the man who refused to sell his soul, even when he was starving. The day of the new Lagos City signing was meant to be the crowning achievement of Chief Marcus Thorne's career. The grand ballroom of the Echo Hotel was a sea of white lilies and golden chandeliers. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the hushed whispers of the city's most powerful elite. Cameras flashed as Marcus stood at the podium, looking every bit an invincible titan, his suit tailored to hide the small scar that was the only evidence of his humanity. Today, we build the future, Marcus announced, his voice booming through the speakers. Thorn Industries stands for excellence, for strength, and for the vision that moves Nigeria forward. But just as he picked up the golden pen to sign the multi-billion naira contract, the heavy oak doors at the back of the hall swung open. The sound echoed like a gavel in a courtroom. A line of sleek white SUVs, not the black ones of the local politicians, but the armored vehicles of international diplomats, pulled into the driveway visible through the glass walls. A man in a simple charcoal grey suit stepped out. This was Mr. Ibrahim, the chairman of the Golden Hand.
Marcus's face split into a triumphant grin. Ah, Mr. Ibrahim, you are just in time to witness history. But Ibrahim didn't walk toward the podium. He turned and opened the back door of his vehicle. Out stepped an elderly woman in a simple idol and buba, the same woman from the church mission. And leaning on a cane, dressed in a clean but faded shirt, was Kofi. The silence that fell over the room was so heavy it felt physical. Marcus's hand began to tremble, the golden pen hovering over the paper. Mr. Ibrahim, what is the meaning of this? Marcus stammered, his voice losing its thunder. Why have you brought this disgruntled former employee to my signing? Ibrahim walked slowly to the stage, his eyes fixed on Marcus with a look of pure disgust. We don't just invest in buildings, Marcus. We invest in the hearts of the men who build them. My mother, he said, gesturing to the elderly woman, told me about a man who carried her to safety while his own surgical wounds were still fresh. A man who was homeless because he had been fired for the very surgery that saved your life. The crowd gasped. The senator at the front row pulled back, as if Marcus was suddenly contagious. I have the medical records, Marcus, Ibrahim continued, his voice rising. I have the termination letter you signed, and I have the NDA you tried to force him to sign to bury the truth. You thought you could remove the man and keep the gift. But in our world, the gift and the man are one. Ibrahim took the contract from the podium and with one swift motion tore it in half. The new Lagos City project will not be built on a foundation of betrayal. As of this moment, the Golden Hand has bought your outstanding bank debts. You aren't signing a contract today, Marcus. You are signing over your company. Ibrahim turned to Kofi, his expression softening into one of deep respect. Kofi, a man who gives his life for his enemy, is the only man fit to lead a foundation for the people. You won't be a clerk anymore. We are appointing you as the chairman of the New Lagos Medical Trust. You will have the resources to ensure no sister has to worry about tuition and no hero has to sleep in a church basement. The room erupted into applause, but it wasn't for the chief, it was for the man with the cane. Marcus Thorne collapsed back into his chair, the chair that no longer belonged to him, clutching his side. The kidney was working perfectly, but the empire it was supposed to save had crumbled into dust. The cameras that were once focused on Marcus Thorne's victory now turned their lenses toward Kofi. The room, filled with the scent of lilies, felt different, as if the air had finally been cleared of a long-held lie. Marcus sat frozen, a man who still had his life but had lost his soul. He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had signed a letter to discard a hero, and realized that no amount of money could buy back the respect that had just evaporated. Kofi stood tall, supported by his cane but held upright by his integrity. He didn't look at Marcus with hatred. He looked at him with a quiet, devastating pity. "You thought the kidney made me part of you, Chief," Kofi said softly, his voice carrying through the silent hall. "But it was the heart that truly mattered, and that you could never take." As the security detail led a dazed Marcus Thorne out of the side exit, not to a waiting limousine, but to a future of litigation and shadows, Kofi was surrounded by people who finally saw him. But he wasn't looking for their praise. He looked toward the door, where his sister Efwa was being ushered in by Mr. Ibrahim's staff. The siblings embraced, their tears marking the end of a long, bitter winter and the start of a harvest they had earned through blood and grace. The story of Kofi and Marcus Thorne is a story we all live every day. We live in a world that tells us to climb the ladder at any cost, to treat people as stepping stones, and to forget those who helped us when we were nothing. But the universe has a way of balancing the scales. Marcus Thorne thought he was the architect of his own destiny, but he forgot that a building is only as strong as its foundation. By trying to erase the man who saved him, he erased himself. Kofi, on the other hand, gave away a piece of his body and gained a destiny that no bank could ever seize.